Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. Let's start with the Olympics. The Paris Olympics kicked off on Friday with the opening ceremonies. I enjoyed them. I thought they looked good. Historic river parade and a Celine Dion showstopper ignited the Paris Olympics. The Paris ceremony stressed togetherness and unity in a world that has suffered wars, massacres, and political upheaval since the COVID-delayed Tokyo Olympics of 3 years ago. So a point I want to make about the Olympics real quick is that dictators love the Olympics. One, it's an opportunity to push nationalism at home, but two, it gives authoritarians legitimacy when their athletes are competing on the same stage as athletes from democracies. The Olympics are so important to dictators, they revolve major decisions around them. And I've got two pretty strong data points to prove my point. The first one is the Beijing Olympics back in February of 2022. Putin had made up his mind. He had already decided to invade Ukraine prior to this, weeks in advance. But he didn't want to have his own athletes disqualified, and he didn't want to embarrass the Chinese. So the Beijing Olympics were between February 4th and February 20th of 2022, and then Putin launched the full-scale invasion on February 24th. He waited 72 hours and sent his troops in after the closing ceremonies in Beijing. And he did the exact same thing 10 years ago. So the Sochi Olympics in Russia were between February 7th of 2014 and February 23rd. And as soon as the Olympics were over, he invaded and annexed Crimea on February 27th. Games ended on February 23rd. He annexed Crimea on February 27th. Once again, I want to make the point, dictators really love the Olympics. This is kind of a downside or a dark side to the Olympics. I personally enjoy them. I want everyone in the world to enjoy them. But we can't ignore what countries like China and Russia are doing, specifically for propaganda purposes, with the Olympic Games. Long an Olympic powerhouse, Russia has the smallest participation in 30 years. So Russia wasn't banned, but they're not allowed to fly their flag. And only 15 Russian athletes have qualified and then accepted the invitation to the Paris Games. This is the lowest number of Russian athletes competing in the Olympics in 30 years, not since the 1994 Winter Olympics. So Russia's not happy. Putin's not going to get any propaganda wins in Paris. So of course, what are they saying about the opening ceremony? Russia slams Olympic opening as a massive failure. The foreign ministry spokeswoman said the center of Paris was transformed into a ghetto for homeless people while rats flooded the streets. But let's talk about Ukraine. Here is the Ukrainian athletes on their boats sailing down the river during the opening ceremonies. And I just want to share this video of the Ukrainian athletes happy and excited to compete in the games. Now, these Ukrainian athletes are excited to compete, excited to be in Paris, but no one wants to forget. Ukraine strives to keep memory of athletes who died fighting ahead of the Paris Olympics. With the start of the 2024 Olympic Games, Ukraine is determined to remind the world of the athletes who were robbed of their chance to participate by the war with Russia. Here's an excellent article from the Kyiv Independent, Ukrainian athletes who will never have a chance to compete at the Olympics because they all gave their lives for their country. I'll link this down below if you want to see their pictures and read some of their stories. Here's a memorial set up in front of Big Ben, and the number is now 488. When this picture was taken, it was 487, but Ukraine is still losing their best every single day in this war. And the Olympics are about peace. That was the purpose. But I have to share this picture of Vovchansk. While the world is competing in these games, Ukraine is still fighting for their survival against a war of aggression, and the Russians are committing genocide. This is the city of Vovchansk in Kharkiv. Just going back in time 3 months ago, this was a peaceful, thriving city close to the Russian border. But Russia decided this territory belonged to them, so they destroyed every building and they've killed anyone who tried to remain in the city. The world can't ignore this. When it comes to the map update, guys, the Russians are making progress in Donetsk. Every day they gobble up another field. When you zoom out and look at the big picture, it's not much to crow about, but it is still progress being made on the map. And I want to make a point real quick that I think some of my fellow YouTubers haven't made. They're asking, why can't they stop this advance? Why haven't they dug the trenches? Why haven't they gotten them the supplies? Why don't they have the manning? And there's a military science that goes into this. How many Ukrainian defenders do you want to put in a trench to stop an ordinary Russian advance? If you put more soldiers in a trench, that means your casualty rates will go up every time Russia drops a Fab 500 bomb on a trench. So the Ukrainian military knows and understands how many guys to put in what location to minimize their own casualties, but still give them an excellent chance at repelling the Russians. But if the Russians commit enough armor and men and glide bombs to take a wheat field, they're going to take that wheat field. So this is what the Russians have been doing for the last couple months, pushing their military to the max, to gobble up enough land, or as much land as they can, prior to peace talks. Russia wants a ceasefire. Russia wants peace talks. They think it's going to happen after Trump is elected in November, so they're pushing everyone to the max to take as much land as possible to give themselves the strongest position once they go to negotiations. But this is a sign of weakness. Russia is desperate for negotiations because they know their resources aren't infinite, and there's a lot of bad news for Russia I'm going to share with you in a second. But first, I want to share this video of a Russian mother whose son is fighting in this war, and her son's not doing well. Let me share with you what this Russian mother has to say. Give me advice about who I can complain to and what I can do. My son was heavily wounded several times. After the first wound, they sent him back immediately, with shrapnel they did not allow to be pulled out. With a broken ear, he's missing an eardrum. He has pus coming out of his ear continuously. They didn't let him have surgery because there are not enough people. He was heavily wounded recently. He has shrapnel in his belly. He's been sent back. He was arrested by the military unit 06414 of the city of Kaliningrad. He was locked up. He went there today and was simply locked up. They said he was arrested, but didn't indicate on what grounds. They reported that he was being sent back to the war on the next plane. His contract ran out almost 2 years ago, but he still hasn't been decommissioned. They're not letting him to get shrapnel pulled out or have surgery on his ear. With shrapnel in his belly, he's not allowed to move, jump, and lift heavy weights. They're not even letting him gather his things, ordinary things in medicine that they don't provide at the base. It's simply lawlessness. What is happening? I just don't understand. I have been disabled since childhood. I have a difficult condition. I have myasthenia. I shouldn't be getting stressed. I was in the ER several times already. He's my only son. Please advise who I can complain to about this. The Ministry of Defense writes me off with the same phrase in response to all of my complaints and pleas. It is the order of the president. I'm embarrassed to ask, is our president a czar and God? Do we not have a constitution? Do we not have a labor inspection commission? He does not have a contract. He paid his dues to the motherland. Let my son go. I beg you, please advise me who I should complain to. What should I do? This Russian mother just answered her own question. Yes, you have a czar, and he acts like he's your god. Your son's gonna die, lady, I'm sorry, but tell your friends. Tell your friends to not let their sons sign contracts and go to Ukraine. Let's get to the bad news for Russia. There's a lot today. Russian Su-34 bomber crashes during a training flight. This wasn't shot down and the crew did survive, but there was some kind of maintenance failure and a Su-34 bomber crashed in the Volgograd region. There are some videos online of the crash site. I'll link them down below if you want to see them for yourself. Ukraine damages 3 helicopters in Russian territory. Ukraine's intelligence service hits Russian choppers in a daring sabotage. So this was a Mi-8, Mi-28, and a Ka-226. This happened here on the map. This is near the airfield Kryaz. And the helicopters were set on fire. I think this was a sabotage act by partisans in Russian territory. There is a video, I'll link it down below. This is a crazy story. Mali army and Russian mercenaries suffer heavy losses in the north. A junta led by Colonel Assimi Goita took power in 2022 and broke the country's traditional alliance with France in favor of Russia. And that's when Wagner mercenaries started deploying to Mali in massive numbers. So this is Mali right here. Russia's involved because they want their resources. They helped a junta overthrow the government, which prior was pro-French. But some local Mali militants attacked a Wagner convoy and killed a bunch of Russians and took some prisoners. And included in the casualties is the leader of the Telegram channel Gray Zone. This is a pro-Wagner Telegram channel with over 500,000 subscribers. And it is confirmed the admin of this channel was killed in this attack. There's some crazy pictures and videos online. I'll link them down below if you want to see it for yourself, but these are local Mali militants. These are not good guys. But they're attacking the Russians, trying to set up shop in Mali. So these are not good guys fighting clearly bad guys. I'm not going to lose sleep over this incident. Ukrainian drone reportedly sparks fire at a Russian fuel depot. The alleged drone strike in Russia's Kursk region followed Saturday's confirmed reports of 3 Ukrainian drone strikes on air bases and refineries in the Ryazan region. This is where this oil depot was located. It was a relatively small one, but Ukraine got it. These drone strikes are never going to stop. Here's a crazy headline. Man sets himself ablaze in Red Square. So yes, somebody attempted self-immolation in a form of protest. And I don't think it was about the war in Ukraine, but the war in Ukraine has triggered a lot of things in Russia. So this man was 74 years old. His name was Vladimir Arseniev, and he works at the Central Research Institute Volna. And apparently he complained that his company was being deliberately bankrupted and appealed for help, and nobody was willing to help him or his business because corruption. And he decided to set himself on fire in front of the Kremlin. Former Russian Deputy Defense Minister arrested on corruption charges. This man's name is Dmitry Bulgakov, and he's suspected of creating a scheme to supply low-quality food at inflated prices to Russian troops to steal the money. Corruption. Here's an excellent article from the Moscow Times showing a timeline of all the Defense Ministry purges. Putin waited until after his election to start going after Shoigu's deputies. The first one was Timur Ivanov back in April, but every week or maybe a couple of weeks, Russia continues to arrest and purge top generals for corruption. Yes, they're all guilty of corruption, but every Russian officer is probably guilty of some level of corruption. These guys are guys that Putin suspects are not loyal to him, or potentially in the future could participate in some kind of coup. This is what happened to General Surovikin after Prigozhin's thunder run to Moscow. But are ordinary Russians not going to have a conversation about all of their top generals at the defense ministry being arrested or killed mysteriously? Like, how does Russia function? Dam collapses in Russia's Chelyabinsk region, forcing hundreds to flee. Chelyabinsk is located right here on the Kazakh border, and this is a pretty large city. And I think this dam was in the oblast, not the city center itself. This is what the video of the dam looks like breaking. I'm sure this is due to lack of maintenance. There's not really money to maintain the infrastructure of Russia. I'll link those videos down below, but here's a video of a Russian trapped on his roof, and this is what he has to say about his village being flooded due to the dam collapsing.
Мы на крыше. Тут вообще пиздец нахуй. Мы все тонем, блядь. Тут все тонуло нахуй. У нас в доме вода дохуя просто. Мы сюда на крышу еле забрались, но тут пиздец. Все смыло нахуй. Абсолютно все нахуй.
Just another day in Russia. Here's another video. I don't think I'm going to read this one. These are Russians once again saying they don't have clean drinking water. This family has been without water for 7 days, and there's children in the video. This breaks my heart, guys. These children are completely innocent. And because Putin wanted to rebuild the Russian Empire, he's diverting all funds and resources away from the common people. Dams are bursting. People are setting themselves on fire. These children haven't had clean drinking water for over a week. And it's going to get worse. Russia's central bank raises rates to 18% amid inflation woes. So if you want to buy a house in Russia, your mortgage rate is now going to be between 21 and 23%. Russia continuously raises their interest rate to try and get inflation under control. But it's bad. I mean, people are estimating that real inflation in Russia, when you go to the grocery store, is about 35% a year now. And there's nothing Russia can do to fix this in the short term. As long as sanctions remain on the country, as long as they have a severe labor shortage because they've sent all the men to Ukraine, yeah, inflation's going to get worse. And eventually Russia's going to have a breaking point. All right, let's talk about U.S. politics. And I know people don't want me to talk about U.S. politics sometimes. But as long as the Russians are going to keep talking about the U.S. presidential race on Kremlin State TV, I'm going to talk about what they're saying. So we've got another clip. Russian State TV is thrilled that Trump told Zelensky resistance is futile. This is a interview that Trump and J.D. Vance did on Fox News. And I have to play for you the beginning of this clip because Trump is talking about the phone conversation he had with President Zelensky. The first conversation Trump and Zelensky have had in years.
So I spoke yesterday, as you know, President Zelensky called me, and we had a good talk. And I said, we got to get this war over. This is a war machine. You're facing a war machine. That's what they do, is they fight wars. They beat Hitler. They beat Napoleon.
So Trump is saying he said to Zelensky, not, America stands with you, we will support you for as long as it takes. He told Zelensky, Russia is a war machine. War is what Russia does. The Russians defeated Napoleon, the Russians defeated Hitler. You need to get this war over with now.
Fighting a war. And the spring offensive never happened. And here they had millions of mines put down, and they had thousands.
Your summer or spring offensive last year never happened. You're losing Ukraine. Give up. Give the Russians what they want. That's the message he's communicating in this interview. This is what he's admitting that he told President Zelensky on the phone. So what are the Russians saying? They're talking about the US election. I want to share this bit. Here's Olga. The situation started to change once there was information about the Republican component. Everyone is looking at what's happening in the United States. Everyone knows that the future developments depend on it. From this standpoint, the situation is clear more or less. That's why everyone is watching what's happening in the United States. Harris is a problem right now. We look at the situation in the swing states. There are 7 main ones. Based on what Biden was doing, 3 more were added. The data for the main states came out today. Trump is still ahead in 4 out of 5 main states. This is the Rust Belt. It's Wisconsin and Michigan. Which has the biggest number of delegates? Pennsylvania, where Biden is from. Arizona and plus minus Nevada. From a technical standpoint, since we're grown-ups, we pay attention to who will be her vice president. This is who will most likely be handling foreign policy. The man chosen by Trump as his vice president, J.D. Vance, said that a childless cat lady can't be president of America. It just so happens Kamala Harris loves cats and has no children. So this is a lie. Kamala Harris does have children. She has stepchildren, and when you're a stepmother, you're still a mother. You still have children. But let's talk about the polls. Because Joe Biden dropped out of the race exactly a week ago. The next day, Kamala Harris announced she was running for president. This was July 24th. So this was President Biden's floor. This was his baseline. He dropped out because Trump was winning. Trump had about 320 electoral votes to Biden's 218. So we're not going to know the real picture of the election for another month. Kamala Harris is going to select her VP this week, and then in 2 or 3 weeks, the Democrats are having their convention. The polls will reflect what Americans are most likely going to do in November, starting in September. But for fun, I mean, it's only been 4 days between these 2 maps, and we've already flipped back to blue Maine and New Hampshire, and Michigan is now white, meaning it's an even tie. This is going to continue to shift for the next 3 or 4 weeks, and we'll see what kind of advantage or lead Kamala Harris can pull ahead of Donald Trump. Let's get to the good news for Ukraine. The European Union transfers $1.6 billion raised from Russian frozen assets, and it's been sent to Ukraine. U.S. miscalculation in defense item valuation yields another $2 billion for military aid for Ukraine. This happened last year and the year before. This is just how the Department of Defense operates. They overcount or overestimate whenever possible, so as not to undercount or underestimate. Everyone's happy when you have extra money, but nobody likes to hear you actually have less than you were supposed to. So this accounting miscalculation or whatever, this has happened the last 2 years. So I think this is just how the Pentagon operates. But either way, $2 billion more in military aid for Ukraine is coming from America. Final clip I want to share for you is President Zelensky and the First Lady of Ukraine visiting the hospital, the children's hospital that the Russians bombed. Zelensky couldn't do this the day of or the week of because he was in the United States for the NATO summit. But Ukraine is trying to repair the hospital as best they can, get it functioning and operational again. And this is President Zelensky visiting the cancer ward for the children at this hospital.
Собака на весь. Ну, чемпион. Я справа. Если честно, детям надо. сильно. Молодець. Я зрозумів, в чому твоя сила. Білі крокси. Ще. Я думаю, що це хазяїн лікарні.
Це намалювала дитина, але вона намалювала задовго. Дякую, це вам. Я не знаю Олені, ні, вам не знаю Богу. Що вона для нас, ця картина дуже символічна.
На рахунок 3. Всі готові? Раз, два, три. Супер, усі молодці.
These are genuine moments you never see in dictatorships. Vladimir Putin is incapable of this level of human empathy and kindness. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.